What's up everybody, Jesse here, and today we have Miss Click with us to discuss more Breath of the Wild. In our previous video, we discussed our thoughts on the future DLC and new dungeon coming to Breath of the Wild. In our next few videos, we will discuss the timeline placement and more, as well as a brief interview about her Twitch and YouTube channels. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos, then like and leave your thoughts on today's video in the comments below. Today we'll start out by talking about what we want from the next big Zelda game before we move on to what we liked and disliked or would have changed about Breath of the Wild. I want to start by saying we did have a third guest, but their video and audio had some technical issues and couldn't be used. So if this video has random cuts, I apologize. So this isn't really a negative toward Breath of the Wild, but I have noticed since playing it and experiencing the amount of freedom the game gives you, I went back to try and play Final Fantasy 15. And I kept having moments where I would see a giant mountain or want to climb to the top of a hill even though I knew the game wouldn't let you. So with Nintendo adding so many groundbreaking changes to the Zelda series with Breath of the Wild, what are your hopes for the next big Zelda game?
Well, for a few things, I kind of was thinking about this like back when Skyward Sword came out, is I personally loved the motion controls. Yeah. I adopted them and it was like the most seamless thing. Like you're up, I was already standing whenever I played a Zelda game. This is the first time I've actually sat down through an entire thing. Like you get pumped up and you're amped up and you're swinging the sword and you're actually, doing it accurately. So for me, it was like, I was really hoping motion controls be completely installed in. When I found out that it wasn't, I was kind of like, dang, it's back to button mashing. But at the same time, I was okay with it because they still had, panning for vision and for your bow. And half the time I find myself using that when I'm aiming with my bow or when I'm using my Sheikah Slate, I'm using that. So it's a good mix between the two worlds. So I think we definitely need to keep that motion control and the sense of, I think it's so much better because it's oftentimes, unless you're really good with it, when you're using the joystick, I find it very hard to get exact aim. So in the mix of the joystick to move really fast to one area and then aim, I love that. So as long as I keep motion control, and then I don't know necessarily how I could feel about weapons continuing to break. I think every now and then that kind of got a little annoying, but at the same time it kept you on your toes, so it didn't feel stale as, oh, now I have a really good weapon, I'm just going to stick with it. It's like, no, you need to pick and choose when you're going to use that. So I love that resourcefulness. So as long as they have that in some aspect, and the runes were really cool too. I don't know if that would be too much of a homage to the next one, but then other than that, I think maybe have a mix between the two worlds. I think what you guys were saying about it, changing it up and giving it a breath of fresh air, I think as long as maybe you can have both, in the next game where you have some adventure type scenarios with shrines and with many tiny little challenges to keep you going, but maybe have some optional big dungeons too, to where not everybody's going to want to go through them and like defeat them, but those who do, you're kind of like, haha, I did it and you didn't. I did it and you did not, So I don't know. I think it'd be really cool.
That was something I was talking about during my live stream earlier. Is typically in a Zelda game, whenever I do something big in the game, like conquer a dungeon, beat a boss, get a new weapon, for me, I get that sense of accomplishment. To whereas in this game, everything is just completely optional. Where in past games, you had to do certain things to progress the story. And I like the freedom in Breath of the Wild, but I don't get that same accomplishment that I get from playing games like Skyward Sword or Twilight Princess. Because if you complete, when you complete a dungeon or whatever in Breath of the Wild, you don't really get that new weapon or that. I felt the boss fights were a little bit lacking in Breath of the Wild as well, so I didn't really get that huge enjoyment out of beating this really tough boss, because I guess they had to design every boss as if you could fight it whether he was the first boss you fought or the very last, because you can go to any of them in any order, so they all have to be made with that ease or that easy difficulty. To whereas in past Zelda games, typically if you get to one of the final bosses, it's going to be a lot harder than some of the bosses that you fought early on in the game. So there wasn't that sense of accomplishment, and I'm hoping that's something they can fix with the next Zelda game, or at least make them feel different enough from one another You were talking about Skyward Sword. I really like that game too. I know a lot of people complain about the motion control, but in a video that I'm working on right now, actually, I'm in the middle of editing, and in it I say that I really like Breath of the Wild story, and I compare it to Skyward Sword, whereas I think Skyward Sword's one of the best stories you can get from a Zelda game if you can get past the motion controls. Because a lot of people pick Skyward Sword up, they'll play it for a few minutes, they'll think it's cool but not be interested, or they just can't get past the motion controls. But if you can, then the story is really good, the dungeons are really awesome.
Right.
And in Breath of the Wild, it's the story is really good, and there's nothing that kind of holds you back. Like, there's nothing to get over. You don't have to get past the motion controls or like a really horrible tutorial introduction.
I think it's just the one-hit death that you have to get used to.
Yeah.
The Zelda Souls.
Yeah. And then, so with the next game, I would really like it to be the same freedom and exploration of Breath of the Wild. And I really liked the abilities you get. I really liked the different runes that you get. But I hope there's the return of the traditional weapons that you use in the dungeon. Maybe it's optional to use it, so you don't necessarily have to use it, just like in shrines and dungeons in Breath of the Wild, there's 2 or 3 different ways to solve everything. If they could have it somehow be like that, but still somehow be based around a certain weapon, I just really like that in past Zelda games. So if it was something like that, to where instead of having the 4 big guardians or whatever and 120 different shrines, if they had it to where there was 10 or 12 different actual temples or dungeons that were themed, and they were spread out all around a huge world, I think it would be, as you were saying, the best of both worlds. So that's what I'm really hoping for, is to kind of take everything that they did with Breath of the Wild and mix in some of the old Zelda stuff. But
I think what's cool though, to go on top of that, like major item type accomplishment, is I think it was cool, especially when you're in the world of YouTube or Twitch, when you're interacting with a whole bunch of different people, or you watch a video and you're like, wait, how did they get that piece of attire? Or how did they get that saddle or that bridle or, like that specific weapon? And I think it's cool because a lot of times, like when I'm streaming or something, people will be like, whoa, what are you wearing? Like, where did you get that? Or, in the beginning towards, people are like, how did you dye your clothes? So it's like a whole bunch of, because it wasn't so structured, you could feel accomplished in the sense of, this is how my mind worked. It was a little bit different than yours. You went to a totally different region before I did, and I got this item, and now let me tell you about it. So it was kind of cool in the sense, or it made you really want to be like, whoa, where did you get that? Let me know. Like, help me, like, expand my horizons on the world of Hyrule. So I thought that was really cool too. It definitely was another side of Zelda that you never would have gotten before with the other games, like you were saying, because you had to get this item to proceed to defeat this dungeon to go and get the next item, and everybody had the same items by the end of the game. And I think with this one, it's cool that you can not just acquire them in different order, but some people just don't even acquire the same items that you might. So I think that's cool.
I was watching our mutual friend Holly. I was watching one of her live streams, and she was in an area that I still haven't even seen yet, and I have everything in my map filled in. I've searched like through all of the different areas trying to look for different shrines, but I remember her being in a very specific location, and I've yet to find it. So and then there's the village at the very south in like the rainforesty area close to the beach, and I was maybe 30 hours into the game before I even found that village. So in my head I was like, oh my god, there's a completely new village down here that I never, and just opened up a bunch of different side quests, characters, stories, and everything else. So it's really cool that even though I'm so far in, I know there's things that I haven't found yet, and there's more stuff left to discover. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
What about 3 of your biggest praises for Breath of the Wild and 3 of your biggest complaints, or something that you would change about the game?
Praises, at first I thought it would have been a complaint. So it ended up working out really well. Is the the minimalistic use of music. And in itself actually became some of the most dynamic part of the game, because you had music in like each different area for different scenarios, or whether you're walking or you're on horse. I think that was really cool, but because it was so scattered here and there, that it made the themes that did exist and that did repeat much more endearing, so I think like the main theme obviously is probably one of the most well-known pieces out of the entire game, but then you have like Urbosa's theme or Rivali's theme, or Mipha's theme, and like you instantly are drawn back to that. And I think they stick out more in your mind because there's less to choose from. I think that in a way has made the game a very minimalistic yet extremely complicated in the music scheme. And then I mean, other praises, I think, just really showing a different side of the characters with the voice acting, and really Nintendo's envisioning, for not just the characters, but also the different cultures that each character was speaking for. I know there's a lot of debate, at the beginning before the game even launched, of which voice acting is better, English, Japanese, like Spanish, all these different kind of things. And it was cool because different people have different mindsets of how they heard Zelda when they were reading these characters in their heads, for the past installments. So I think it was cool that Zelda for the Japanese was much more dramatic, and she was very, loud and very almost like anime-like, and then with Zelda in English, she's much more probably how I would have always interpreted Zelda, which was very like stoic and trying to be strong and trying to be all together, and then all of a sudden she falls apart. And then, I mean, just for things maybe that I wish probably would have been a little bit different, but at the same time, I really don't have that much of a complaint about and this is probably because I'm drawing from Skyward Sword, is Link himself. I think that unless you go and find Zelda's diary, which spoilers, sorry, if you go and find Zelda's diary, in the castle, she's talking about what Link has told her. And I won't say what he says, but you wouldn't have known that about Link unless you had found that diary. And I think that adds a whole different aspect to Link. But I think even just cutscene shots or cutscene, close-ups or just follows of Link, how he acts as a character, you don't get as much in depth of that as you do with like Skyward Sword. And again, I was just watching it a few minutes ago, like some of the ending scenes. And even then, like you still get more alone intimacy time with the camera and with Link, and you get to see how he is. And the memories are really cool and all, but ultimately it's usually him with someone else. And usually they're speaking and he's observing, or, he's being, knighted, and they're talking about him. And so you don't really get to see Link become angry by himself or become extremely happy or sad by himself necessarily. It's always usually partnered with someone else. So I wish you could have got a little bit more intimate time with knowing Link as he is in this incarnation. So,
all right,
that's me.
So for me, what I liked most about the game was just the openness and the freedom, being able, I guess this is the same thing everybody likes about the game, but actually being able to do everything that you want to do without being restricted. For example, Ocarina of Time. You couldn't get past the bridge to Gerudo Fortress or the desert without fixing the bridge or having Epona or having the hook shot. It gave you a couple of ways to get past it, but you weren't free to just go there. Just like in... what was that? My phone died now. Alright. Let me click X on this. Also in Ocarina of Time, there was Zora's Domain, which you can get to very early in the game, but you still need to know Zelda's Lullaby and everything, and the waterfall kind of blocks you. It's just small stuff that blocks you. Another thing that comes in mind is what really blocks you is Majora's Mask, to where like you need the arrow before you can go to the Goron area, because there's the ice that's blocking you from getting there. But this game, like, you can literally go anywhere, do everything you want from the very beginning, so I think that's cool. I guess Link's expression, I never really thought about that, except whenever I was looking at some of the cutscenes. I do remember in Wind Waker, they purposefully made him very expressive. Like, yeah, you could have him smile, frown, do whatever you wanted. I think they even said that they liked the cartoony art style in the Wind Waker because it allowed him to be more expressive. Right. Which they weren't really able to do in Twilight Princess, because the cartoony art style allows you to be more exaggerated with your expression. So with Breath of the Wild, to me it looks almost like an anime, so I found it kind of odd that Link wasn't as expressive as he could have been, because there were clear moments where I would imagine he would be mad or frustrated, but he just kind of has that determined look 90% of the time.
Yeah, or like an innocent obliviousness, like he doesn't know that they're completely trash talking everything that he is right now.
So finally, the timeline for Breath of the Wild's placement. Where do you think it's going to be, or think it is? I want to thank you all for watching this video, and welcome to the End Slate. If you're a fan of these videos, you can follow me on Twitter for updates on future videos at GameOverJesse. Please subscribe, like, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you would like to watch even more of my videos, click the video to the left, or let me know what types of videos you would like to see in the future. I would like to take the rest of this time to thank all of my Patreon supporters. If you're a fan of this channel and would also like to help us out by becoming a Patreon supporter and get some awesome rewards for yourself, like being a part of my videos, shoutouts, custom avatars, giveaways, being added to our private Discord to chat during live streams, and more, please visit patreon.com/GameOverJesse, where even smaller supporters at the $1 level will get you some awesome stuff. Finally, a huge thank you to this month's supporters: George Says Hi, Link Uses the Triforce, Transcendent Sacred Courage, Glenn Cassio, Prey Warrior, Lunarium, Chris Gasparin, Harris Priest, Lovable Christie, Key of Time 15, Jerome Measure, Daryl Quinnen, Furzen 16, Kadron, Magic Tech Review, and the Itch Network.